We are now on the record. My name is Andrew Smith, and I'm the videographer for Gastel Litigation Services. Today's date is February 26th, 2020, and the time on the monitor is 9:07 a.m. This video deposition is being held at Hampton Inn & Suites, 3934 Grandview Drive, Simpsonville, South Carolina, 29680, in the matter of Barry Staubus v. Purdue Pharma et al. For the Court of the Circuit Court for Sullivan County at Kingsport, Tennessee. The opponent is Todd E. Dean. All counsel will be noted for the stenographic record. Will counsel please identify themselves?
Ben Gastel on behalf of the plaintiffs.
Good morning, John Bucher on behalf of Mallinckrodt and the witness.
Jess Sorcelli on behalf of Mallinckrodt LLC and the witness.
The court reporter is Karen Kidwell and will now swear the witness.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Before we begin, let me just note for the record that this deposition was actually noticed for the Holiday Inn Express and Suites at 642 Fairview Road, Simpsonville, South Carolina, 29680. That's not where the deposition is in fact taking place. So I'll ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit 1 to the deposition the plaintiff's amended notice of deposition, and I'll state for the record our objection to the deposition, and I'll state for the record that any time that was wasted coming over here will count against the plaintiffs in terms of the presumptive 7-hour limit.
Well, first of all, there's no 7-hour limit in state court in Tennessee, as the defendant should know, since the deposition that I attended on Monday was like 8.5 hours on the record. With that being said, it's not really going to matter. We're not going to be here all day. I apologize for the mix-up. Notwithstanding what your counsel just said, are you prepared today to give a deposition in the case that was noted by the videographer?
I am.
And I was going to mark as Exhibit 1 the notice of deposition anyways, so we can go ahead and mark that.
It's going to you. Am I holding it?
You're going to hold on to it?
Okay.
And you understand that we're here today pursuant to the notice that was identified as Exhibit 1 by your counsel.
I do.
And you understand that you're here to give sworn testimony in that case.
I do.
Where do you live, sir? What is your address? How long have you lived there?
I believe right over 12 years.
Who lives there with you?
My wife and 3 sons.
You have any plans to move anytime soon?
No.
When did you first learn that you would have to sit for a deposition in this case?
Don't recall. It's probably right at 30 days ago.
And I understand that this deposition was supposed to go a couple weeks ago, and then you had requested that it be moved as a result of some work obligations. Is
Sure.
that fair? I don't want to know anything that you might have said to one of your lawyers, but I do want to know, when was the first time that you talked to a lawyer about the subpoena that you were served with in this case?
Yesterday.
And again, I don't want to know what was said in any conversation with counsel, but what did you do to prepare for today's deposition?
Really not much. I was just gaining context yesterday more than anything, based on, what's taken place to date.
And it sounds like you met with counsel again. I don't want to know what happened in that meeting.
Yep.
But where was it? Was it in person or on the phone?
In person here in Simpsonville.
And how long was that meeting?
I don't recall exactly.
Was it an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours?
Probably 2.5, 3 hours.
You're no longer employed by Covidian Mallinckrodt, correct?
Correct.
I understand that when you were working for Mallinckrodt, it was part of Covidian. Is that fair?
Yeah, it was under the Covidian name.
But you understand that entity that you were working for is now sort of operating under the Mallinckrodt name. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that, but that was post my leaving the company.
I understand that. So throughout today's deposition, I might use the term Covidian or Mallinckrodt, but do you understand that what I'm referring to is that entity that you worked for from approximately June 2011 to February 2013?
Generally, yes.
So can we have that understanding throughout today that if I use those two
Yes.
terms, I'm kind of using them interchangeably?
Todd, I'm just going to break in here for a second. As Ben's asking you questions, the court reporter's taking it down, and in order for her to take down what's being said,
Slow
you
down.
can't talk over each other.
Okay.
So just let him finish and then give your answer.
Okay.
Are you represented by counsel today at this deposition?
I am.
And is your understanding is the counsel sitting across from me?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you a copy of what we'll mark as Exhibit 2. I'm going to hand you a couple copies. Given the room, is it okay if you pass the 2 extra copies over to your counsel over there?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Well, then you're probably a little bit familiar with the dynamic, but I'll just say this. Anytime you need to take a break today, sir, just let me know. If there's a question pending, I'm only going to ask you to answer that question, then we can go take a break. If you need a drink, you need to go to the bathroom or whatever. Okay?
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm going to go kind of quick because I don't think anybody wants to sit in this conference room all day, and I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. But you've just been handed a document that's been marked as Exhibit 2.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with this document, sir?
Yeah.
This is your LinkedIn profile, right?
Right.
Did you input this material into LinkedIn to sort of show your professional work?
Yes.
It shows that you've been working at OB Hospitalist Group for approximately 7 years. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And was that the job that you took after you left Covidian?
That's correct.
I don't really want to spend too much time on this, but can you just give me just a broad overview of what you do for the OB Hospitalist Group?
Sure. So I'm a vice president of business development. I call on hospitals. We contract with over 180 hospitals across the country, and essentially we provide physician services in the labor and delivery department with partner hospitals to provide a higher level of care 24/7 on expecting mothers.
Okay, and is that because obviously mothers give birth kind of they don't respect holidays, they don't respect nights, and so it's hard for hospitals to kind of get coverage for late night for OBGYN care?
Object to the form.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the terminology a patient doesn't respect when to have a baby. But no, it is a patient safety and care initiative with a more acute level of care to the patient in a timely manner.
Okay. And has that been your role since you joined them 7 years ago? Or has it changed over that time?
That's been my role.
So is it fair to say that you're no longer working in the pharmaceutical sales space?
That's correct.
And then on your LinkedIn profile here, it shows that you were the specialty pharmaceuticals manager for Covidian from June 2011 to February 2013.
I believe that's correct.
So that's approximately 21 months.
I believe that's correct.
And it shows that you put on here that this reference to the President's Club and that you were a President's Club Specialty Manager Award recipient. What is that, sir?
Essentially, and again, this is close to 8 years ago, but of the 15 to 20 districts they have across the country, they're looking for performance-based, and often that's around metrics such as growth as well as performance of individuals on the team that you lead. And I think they identified 3 of the 15 to 20 districts in that regard.
So does that mean that you were kind of heading up one of the top sales districts for Covidian at that time?
Objection form.
Certainly not within the first year, but the last portion of when I was there, I would say yes.
And the specialty pharmaceuticals manager put you on the branded side as opposed to the unbranded side, is that fair to say?
Strictly branded.
Do you recall the drugs that you were principally responsible for on the branded side during that
Yep.
time?
It was just 2. It was Pensed and Exalgo.
Pensed treats migraine headaches.
No, Pensed's an NSAID. It's a topical pain reliever. And Exalgo is an extended release therapy for chronic pain.
It's an opioid, right?
Yes.
Is there a reason why you decided to leave the pharmaceutical space and go to the OB hospitals group?
Opportunity, the fact that the company OB Hospitals Group is based right here in Greenville, South Carolina. Everything I do today is appointment based. So when I leave town, it's very much I know where I'm going and I come back home. And I make considerably more money than I ever did in pharmaceuticals.
Why'd you leave?
I want to talk a little bit about obviously today's deposition is going to almost exclusively focus on the 21-month period when you were at Covidian. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the structure of the sales team. Who in the sort of organizational chart did you report to? Who is above you?
Bill Nichols, he's a regional director.
Did you sometimes refer to yourself as the district manager?
I think that was the term used.
And as district manager, you had a sales team under you that you managed, is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
I need a verbal response,
Yes.
sir. And during that 21-month period, do you remember the geographic region that your sales team covered?
Generally, all of South Carolina, where I preside, Western North Carolina, a little bit in Northeast Georgia, and a little bit in Eastern Tennessee.
That include the Knoxville region?
It did.
And was that true for your entire 21-month period?
I think the tail end of it, there was some restructuring of the geography, and there was a portion of that went to a North Carolina manager, which is not uncommon in pharmaceuticals. I mean, they restructure districts often yearly.
As district manager, would you occasionally go and ride along with the sales folks under on your team to do ride-alongs to see how they were operating in districts?
Yeah, but it was pretty rare. I mean, I had, think at the time 12 people in the district, so you're not spending a lot of time with any one person.
Do you recall ever doing one of those ride-alongs to see a doctor in Tennessee?
Sure.
Do you remember how many times you were in Tennessee?
I don't.
Do you remember any of the doctors that you personally visited during those sales trips?
I don't. I mean, because I don't personally call on them. I mean, the reps would know them by name. I don't recall.
Did you ever keep a log of like those trips, or any type of notebook to kind of help you remember where you went?
No, not in that regard.
I think you said you had 12 people on your sales team.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you remember their names?
Every single one of them at this point. No, and there was an evolution from when I was hired in the short time I was with the company. I think there was 3 to 4 of them that initially were on the team that were no longer on the team during my time for a number of reasons. And I mean, I could rattle off some, but I don't recall all their names.
Sure. Eric Heichman?
Yes.
Chris Clark?
Yes.
Sorry, that's Chris Clark. I said that really fast. I'm sorry. Teresa Crawford?
Yes.
Cheryl Herbold?
Briefly.
Do you have any understanding about the nature of the claims in this lawsuit?
Not really. I mean, generally.
Have you been following any of the news on opioid-related lawsuits across the country?
Objection.
Not really.
Did you see in the news yesterday about Mallinckrodt's announcement of a pending Chapter 11 filing?
I did not.
Do you have any understanding of, I'm going to call it the opioid epidemic. Your counsel might object to that, but what is your understanding of the opioid epidemic in this country?
Objection 4.
Understanding's broad. I don't really know what you mean by that.
Well, do you have any understanding of problems with opioids in this country?
I do. It's talked about a lot on the news, but
What do you recall seeing on the news?
just generally that there is an epidemic with overutilization of opioids.
And do you understand that that relates to prescription opioids?
Objection.
Not really. I think it's a combination of street use and those that are written, appropriately with providers and potentially diverted.
You use the term there, diverted. What is your understanding of diversion?
Broadly, I don't really understand it other than the fact that there's probably prescriptions written for patients complaining of pain that then divert those therapies to either family members or others that they potentially either give and or sell to.
And was that your understanding when you were working for Covidian back in 2011 to 2013?
Objection.
It was a learned, I would say, understanding. So I didn't understand it when I first started with Covidian. I certainly didn't take the job knowing that.
Are you done?
I am.
Am I understanding your testimony that you learned about diversion while you were at Covidian? You didn't understand it when you first got there, but through the course of your employment, you came to that understanding.
Came more to that understanding based on feedback from representatives in the field.
And that would have been the representatives in the field that were under your supervision?
Not just my supervision. I think it was talked about. But yeah, I mean, I think it was varying degrees of what people's thought of diversion may be.
What is your understanding of what opioid abuse is?
Objection vague.
Yeah, I don't know what you would define as abuse.
Well, I guess maybe I'll let you define what opioid abuse is if you have a definition.
Objection vague.
I don't really know what. Number one, I'm not a prescriber. Number two, abuse could be within a PI. It could be outside of a PI, meaning prescribing information.
What do you mean by prescribing information?
That is an FDA term that is legally, my understanding, approved based on the pharmacokinetics and pharmacologics of a therapy. So every drug goes through the FDA for review before it's put on the market and has clinical trials to support why it should even be allowed on the market that the FDA reviews and then approves by the government.
As someone who worked in pharmaceutical sales, is it fair to say that you were aware of an opioid diversion issue in Tennessee?
Objection.
Generally aware, like I mentioned, that the reps brought that to my attention over time, in their opinion.
When you were working for Covidian, did you ever happen to look up opioid prescription rates in the state of Tennessee?
I never did. You're talking about personally, like just data search that?
Yeah.
No.
Did you ever have conversations with your sales representatives working in Tennessee about concerns related to opioid abuse in Tennessee?
Objection vague.
I think that they would typically bring what they perceived to be challenges in the state of Tennessee, and there would be discussion back and forth.
And what do you recall about those discussions?
Frankly, 8 years ago, not a lot.
And I understand that you're not going to recall precisely the conversation, but what, if anything, do you recall about the conversations?
Generally, that they were concerned that they were in a market space where there was, I wouldn't even use the word diversion as much as just challenges, because they knew there was a lot of patients on opioids in general, and so it could be just day-to-day awareness, and they're sharing information based on a particular instance that they may have run into.
While you were at Covidian, do you recall receiving special training on how to identify problematic opioid prescribers?
Not training in that regard. We had training such as the REMS program and different safety pharmacologic, pharmacokinetic effects of the drug. But it really wasn't training on identifying problem providers.
Do you recall seeing anything troubling on the physicians or pharmacies that you visited in Tennessee?
That I visited?
Yeah.
No.
Would you agree that as early as 2011, Tennessee had been plagued by lenient laws that led to the state being flooded with pill mills?
Objection.
Boy, that's a lot to unpack. Flooded and pill mills. So can I ask you to restate the question?
Sure. Would you agree that as early as 2011, Tennessee had been plagued by lenient laws that led to the state being flooded with pill mills?
Objection.
Yeah, my only understanding as I came on board in 2011 is I learned about my specific reps bubbling concerns up
And what were the concerns that were bubbling up?
Just that there was an overuse of opioids within the state based on state laws.
Do you remember what reps brought that to your attention?
Those who worked in the state of Tennessee.
Chris Clark, was he one of them?
Yes.
Was Eric Heichman one of them?
I don't believe Eric went into Tennessee. I could be wrong on that. He was a Western North Carolina representative.
He's out of Asheville.
Right.
I talked to him last year. Did you believe that pill mills were operating in Tennessee as early as 2011?
Objection.
I mean, generally, the term pill mills, I don't know what you refer to when you refer to a pill mill.
Well, how do you define what a pill mill is?
Objection.
I really don't know. That's a vague term to me.
You didn't have an understanding of what a pill mill was when you were the sales representative for, or I'm sorry, the general manager. Let me start over. You didn't have an understanding of what a pill mill was when you were the district manager for Covidien Specialty Pharmaceuticals.
No. As I mentioned, it was a term I think that was used by people as to their interpretation that was brought to me. But that's a broad term. I don't know that there's a true definition of what a pill mill is.
Well, in your mind, what is a pill mill?
Objection. Asked and answered.
I don't know that it's really something that I can define.
Do you think that it carries a positive connotation?
I wouldn't want to assume on that.
Were you ever told by Bill Nichols or any of your superiors to treat physicians, pharmacies, or nurse practitioners in Tennessee differently than in other states within your territory?
No.
Have you ever reviewed any materials from the Tennessee Department of Health regarding Tennessee's opioid abuse problem?
No.
Did you ever receive any information from any source about Tennessee being plagued with problems with opioids or pill mills?
Objection.
No.
You would agree with me that Covidien directly marketed to Tennessee prescribers and pharmacies in promoting its branded opioids, right?
Can I hear that read back, please?
Question. You would agree with me that Covidien directly marketed to Tennessee prescribers and pharmacies in promoting its branded opioids, right?
Objection. Lack of foundation.
I would say yes.
And how were those promotional efforts done?
I mean, generally at the local level, representatives would represent Exalgo in this case. It's the only opioid that we had, based on the prescribing information provided to them, which they would share with their physicians.
And they would do that through in-person visits, right?
Most of the time, yes.
And that means that they would physically go into a prescriber's office and try to meet with the healthcare practitioner who had prescription powers?
Most of the time. I mean, they can also meet off-site.
and they would commonly buy food like breakfast or lunch when they were coming in for an office visit. Is that fair?
Objection.
I wouldn't say commonly.
But it was done, correct?
It was done on occasion when the office either requested or it was appropriate.
And then sales representatives would also occasionally hold dinners where they would pay somebody to come and speak about Exalgo to other invited healthcare providers, correct?
Yeah, there'd be a speaker bureau approved by the company, and these were experts that would speak to the PI and utilization of the therapeutic option.
And that was done in Tennessee during the time that you worked at Covidian, right?
I don't recall, but what I would say, it was extremely rare.
And in determining how, strike that, in determining what prescribers to call on, sales representatives would target certain types of healthcare providers, correct?
They would not target them. There would be a list of targets that was provided by the organization.
And that's what I'm getting at, is that there's a target list that sales representatives are given, right?
Sure, in every pharmaceutical company.
And that's pretty common throughout the industry, right?
That's correct.
And that's true for your sales representatives operating in Tennessee while you were at Covidian, right?
That's correct.
They would get target lists, and those target lists would be based on the people with. Those target lists would be based on the prescribers within that territory who were writing high volumes of opioid prescriptions, right?
Objection.
That's incorrect.
Well, then how were the target lists developed?
The target was based on their specialty of what they potentially would provide therapeutic option to a patient.
So are you saying that the term high volume prescriber was not part of the target list calculation?
I'm not saying that.
Do you know how Covidian monitored opioid sales in Tennessee during that time period?
Objection. Vague.
I do not.
Does the term IMS health data ring a bell to you at all?
Yeah, IMS data is provided to all pharma companies.
And that was true for Covidian while you were working there in June 2011 through February 2013?
Yes.
And that's pretty standard across the industry, right, that IMS health data set?
I believe so. I don't know if there's other data houses that provide that information, but yes, I think it's fairly common.
And that data would be used in developing the target list, correct?
I don't know. I never created target lists.
When you were the district manager, would you direct your sales representatives to call on the healthcare providers listed in their target lists?
Objection.
Actually, I believe the frequency as well as the weighting of targets in regards to their call list was provided prescriptively from corporate.
And I understand that, but my question, you were the person who had direct supervision over those sales reps in your territory, right?
Sure.
And my question is were you directing them to sort of follow that target list that they received from corporate?
Objection.
Again, I didn't direct them to do so. It was provided to them in their training that they would follow that target list provided to them by the company. So naturally they would follow that because that's what the company said, these are your grouping of targets across your entire geography. But it was more than just Exalgo. They had Pensaid targets, obviously, which was part of their, portfolio.
Sure.
Yep.
And sales representatives would be trained on the messages that they were supposed to deliver to those people on their target list, right?
The brand teams would provide guidance based on the prescribing information as to where the therapeutic option would fit with a provider in their portfolio of options. Yes.
And sales representatives would be given like these training modules to sort of educate them on the drug, right?
Yes.
And then it was the expectation that they would use that training information in their interactions with the physicians, right?
Yes.
As the district manager, would you sit in on those training modules?
No.
Were you familiar with the types of literature that sales representatives would be delivering to physicians on their target list?
Generally, yes, but I never sold anything. So as district managers, we got a general training of what was being used. An awareness is what I would call it, but I manage people. I didn't call on accounts.
Sure. Do you recall being included in email correspondence by some of your sales representatives on the types of sales presentations that they were delivering in the field?
Objection vague.
The type of sales, what was the last part of that?
Presentations.
Sometimes.
Do you recall if Covidian conveyed in its sales presentations that every chronic pain patient suffering from moderate to severe pain can be viewed as a potential candidate for opioid therapy?
Every?
Yes.
No.
Was that something that they shouldn't have been, that sales representatives should not have been conveying to prescribers?
Objection assumes a fact, not an evidence.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me to give him my advice about something over 8 years ago. I don't really recall.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, do you agree that every chronic pain patient suffering from moderate to severe pain can be viewed as a potential candidate for opioid therapy?
Objection asked and answered.
I'm not a provider. I don't have a medical degree. So I think that based on the prescribing information, that's what we shared with physicians for them to make a choice as to whether it was an appropriate patient or not.
Did Mallinckrodt convey in its sales presentations that opioid drugs provided the best balance of pain relief and side effects in the treatment of chronic pain?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Was it your understanding when you worked for Covidian that opioid drugs provided the best balance of pain relief and side effects in the treatment of chronic pain?
Objection.
Again, 8 years ago I managed people. I didn't sell the therapy, so I don't recall that.
I understand that you might not recall whether or not that was said or not, but I'm asking if that's your understanding. So is it your understanding that opioid drugs provide the best balance of pain relief and side effects in the treatment of chronic pain?
Objection, lack of foundation.
Again, I don't recall that. I didn't sell the therapy personally.
Is that bothering you? Are you okay?
I mean, it's a little annoying, to be honest.
Can we go off the record and see if we can fix that?
Time on the monitor is 9:47 a.m. We're off the record. time on the monitor is 9:53 a.m. We are back on the record.
When you were working at Covidian, what was your understanding of the effectiveness of opioids in the treatment of chronic pain?
Objection vague. Overly broad. Can we limit it to Exalgo?
Do you need me
Yes,
to
sir.
repeat the question?
No. Based on the training and the PI that we had, they were effective in treating pain based on the pharmacokinetics of Exalgo. Specifically, I never represented or was aware of the other therapies acutely.
And then did you expect that your sales representatives who were in the field and operating within your territory that you were assigned to or over would deliver that message about the effectiveness of Exalgo in treating chronic pain?
They
to
were
physicians?
trained by the organization based on the prescribing information of Exalgo to speak directly to the effectiveness of Exalgo with prescribers.
And that's what I'm getting at. And they were trained and they were expected to deliver the message to physicians that Exalgo was effective in treating chronic pain, right?
Objection.
You're using a broad term such as the message. They were trained on the prescribing information and to share that information with a provider. And at that point, it's the provider's discretion as to does that fit in their therapeutic option for a patient.
Are you done?
I am.
And part of the prescription information that you're talking about is this idea that Exalgo would be effective in treating chronic pain, right?
I think that's in the prescribing information, yes.
You use the term prescription information. It was common for sales representatives to leave behind literature for the prescribers that they called upon, right?
Objection. Assumes a fact, not evidence.
I don't recall if they did or did not.
Do you remember having pocket card sets to be used?
I don't recall. Again, I didn't sell to the providers personally.
I'm going to hand you a document that we'll mark as Exhibit 3. And if you'd be so kind, I'm going to give you 2 extra copies if you'll pass that over to counsel. Take as much time as you need with that document, sir, but my question is going to be, have you ever seen it?
I don't recall seeing this.
Do you see at the top it says Pain Management Pocket Card Set?
What page? The first
It's the
page?
first page, very, very top.
Yep.
You don't recall if these were the types of materials that were available to your sales representatives to leave for prescribers that they called upon?
Objection. Assumes a fact, not an evidence.
No, I don't recall that.
I hand you a document that we'll mark as Exhibit 4.
Is there more than one here?
Yes, there is.
Then I apologize.
Thank you very
Put
much.
stuff together.
Do you see that this is also labeled as a pocket guide from the American Society of Pain Educators? Do you see that?
I see it on the front cover, yeah.
Do you recall ever seeing this in your work with Covidian?
I don't. I mean, it's listed as 2010. It's 2020. I know I'm getting older, but I don't recall this.
No problem. Will you flip to the second page?
Where it says for internal use only.
Yeah. Do you see at the bottom on the left-hand column, it says critical to distinguish tolerance, dependence, and pseudo-addiction from addiction? Do you see that?
I see it on this document, yes.
Do you recall these terms being used by your sales representatives, the tolerance, dependence, and pseudo-addiction?
I don't recall that.
Do you recall those terms being used in any of the training manuals that were used to train sales representatives?
If the training manual is prescribing information, I do remember tolerance and dependence. The pseudo-addiction I don't recall for.
Do you have any understanding of what the term pseudo-addiction refers to?
I don't recall that at all.
You can put that document to the side. We at 5 already? We're flying through documents. We're going to be done here in a minute.
You know lawyers say that to get your hopes up.
Yeah, I know.
Do you see that on the front cover of this document it is the it's labeled as the Exalgo Learning System Module 3 Focus on Opioids?
I see that on this document.
Do you recall ever seeing this document when you worked at Covidian?
I don't recall.
I want you to flip on at the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see like a number.
Mm-hmm.
Us lawyers, we call those Bates numbers. Will you flip to the Bates number page MNK-T1_00007855729? So 5729.
5729. Okay.
Are you with me?
I believe I am.
Do you see in the paragraph above the header, opioid prescription and regulation, do you see that?
Yes.
So I want to read a little bit.
5729, right?
5729. So do you see the sentence beginning, addiction is defined as? It's the second sentence in that paragraph.
Yeah.
I'm going to read that. Addiction is defined as compulsive use of a drug despite physical harm and overwhelming involvement with its procurement and use. The development of tolerance and physical dependence does not predict the risk of addiction. In fact, while most patients chronically taking opioids for medical reasons develop tolerance and physical dependence, the risk of addiction is low. Did I read that correctly?
As it's stated here, yes.
And that comes from this document that's described as the Exalgo Learning System Focus on Opioids, right?
I mean, it's got footnotes. I'm not really sure where it comes from.
Well, what I'm saying is that the statement that I read is from this training module learning system called Focus on Opioids.
Yes.
Okay. So, was your understanding when you worked for Covidian that the risk of addiction is low for those people chronically taking opioids?
According to the doctor's prescription?
You can stop with your. I'm asking the questions today.
Okay.
I don't need you to redirect.
Objection
You
form.
can just do your objections to form, and I'm going to ask you to stop directing the witness because that's about the third time that you've done that
Objection
today.
form.
Do you need me
Trying
to
to get a
restate the
clear
question?
record.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So, was your understanding when you worked for Covidian that the risk of addiction is low for those people chronically taking opioids?
Objection form.
It's not for me to speculate. I'm not a medical provider, so I would just say that we shared the prescribing information with the provider, and it was their choice as to how they prescribed.
You keep using that term prescribing information, but the prescribing information is the stuff that those sales representatives were trained on to deliver to the doctors, right?
No. The prescribing information is a portion of what they shared, but the prescribing information is what the drug is legally approved for utilization by the FDA, the government. And that's what the drug was approved for, and that's what we provided to the providers to make their choice as to what they thought was best for a particular patient.
But in order to sort of educate the sales representatives to go out in the field and talk to medical professionals, they would go through these training modules, right, on the drug?
Whatever the training department provided to them, but what they utilized in the field was prescribing information. It gave you everything you needed to know about Exalgo.
So is it your understanding that sales representatives didn't take this learning system for Exalgo? I mean,
That they did not take it? What do
Yeah.
you mean take it?
well, I think that your testimony earlier was that sales representatives who were under your direction would be trained prior to going in the field in order to sell Exalgo they would go through these training modules, right?
I believe so. I wasn't part of the training department, though.
And you see that the statement that I read, that that the risk of addiction is low for those patients chronically taking opioids, is in this Exalgo training module, right?
Objection mischaracterizes the document. Objection form.
I think generally it's a portion of this training module, but I don't know in context. I don't know the footnote that's listed there specific to that sentence and where it comes from. It looks to me like it's referenced by probably another organization, if I had to guess. I don't know.
You can look back if you're wondering where the citation comes from. There's a bibliography at the end.
Are you asking me to do that?
Well, I'm just saying you seem to be caught up on the footnote, and so just to clarify, if you want for your own sort of understanding, you
I'm
can
not hung
see.
up on the footnote. You're asking me to verify something I have no verification of.
Well, I'm just saying that the statement that I read, that while most patients chronically taking opioids for medical reasons develop tolerance and physical dependence, the risk of addiction is low. That sentence is in this Exalgo training module, right?
It looks like it cites Doyle, Hanks, Kalman from the Oxford textbook of palliative medicine published by Oxford University.
Sure. That's the footnote.
That's the footnote.
That's
the sentence.
referenced in the sentence that I read.
Right.
And all that I'm asking you is the sentence that I read appears in this Exalgo learning system module 3 focus on opioids, right?
Yeah, so cited from that publication.
And you would agree with me that it's important for sales representatives in order to go interact with doctors to be trained truthfully and accurately in their Exalgo learning systems and training modules, right?
You're asking me if it's important?
Yeah.
It's important that they know the prescribing information. I think that this is generally context of the overall pain management potential and therapies that potentially physicians look at.
Okay. When you worked at Covidian, did you have an understanding of whether or not Exalgo was approved by the FDA as an abuse deterrent opioid?
I think it had mechanisms that made it potentially tough to abuse, in my understanding. But again, this is over 8 years ago. I didn't sell the therapy personally.
And is that what the sales representatives under your supervision were told to tell doctors?
Objection, mischaracterizes his testimony. Objection, lack of foundation.
I don't know what they were trained on from the training department in that regard.
Are you aware that the FDA rejected Mallinckrodt's request for permission to market Exalgo as abuse deterrent?
I'm not aware. I wasn't part of that.
Were you aware that the FDA, in concluding that Exalgo was not approved for abuse deterrent, stated that in terms of abusability appears to be similar to OxyContin?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that the FDA, in rejecting that application, said that Exalgo would increase the potential risks for overdose or abuse in those seeking to defeat the extended release system?
I wasn't part of that. I'm not aware of it.
Were you aware that the FDA, in rejecting Exalgo's request for permission to market Exalgo as abuse deterrent, stated that the FDA predicted that expanded use of Exalgo after marketing raises serious safety concerns and are likely to result in significant abuse and diversion that further impacts the public health and safety?
Objection form.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that is a long statement. I'm not sure if there was a question in there.
Fair enough. It's probably a bad question. By the way, if I ask a bad question that you don't understand throughout the day, just tell me to rephrase. I have no problem doing that. And you're not being offensive. That happens to me all the time. Did you know that the FDA stated and predicted that expanded use of Exalgo after marketing raises serious safety concerns and are likely to result in significant abuse and diversion that further impacts the public health and safety?
Objection form. Objection foundation.
No, I wasn't part of any of that discussion.
If you were aware of that, would that have changed in any way the work that you did for Covidian as the district manager for your territory?
Objection.
You're asking me to speculate on something I wasn't a part of.
I understand, but I'm just saying that if you were aware of those things, do you think that that would have changed any of the things that you did while you were at Covidian?
Objection form. Objection asked and answered.
Yeah, I'm not here to answer hypotheticals.
Does it bother you at all that that's what the FDA was stating formally on the record related to Mallinckrodt's request for permission to market Exalgo as abuse deterrent?
Objection form, foundation.
I'm not here to give an opinion. I'm here because I manage people that had that in their portfolio.
Do you believe that pharmaceutical manufacturers like Mallinckrodt or Covidian that manufacture, promote, and sell prescription opioids are responsible at all for the opioid epidemic?
I'm not here to give an opinion on that.
So are you refusing to answer the question?
No, I'm just not here to speculate on all manufacturers of opioids.
I didn't ask you to. I'm asking you that.
Maybe I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
Do you believe that pharmaceutical manufacturers like Mallinckrodt or Covidian that manufacture, promote, and sell prescription opioids are responsible for the opioid epidemic?
Objection asked and answered. That was the objection.
I can only speak to Exalgo, and my representatives were coached to speak to the prescribing information. If there was things done outside of the prescribing information by a provider, I don't believe Mallinckrodt had responsibility for that.
So this is an email from July 24, 2011. It's an email string. The top email is an email from you to...
Can you just give him a minute? He seems to be reading it.
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Do you see that it's an email from July 24, 2011 sent by you to a variety of people?
Yes.
Those look to be some sales representatives that were in your territory and Bill Nichols. Do you see that?
I do.
And the email is a little bit of an email string, and the subject is New Pain Clinic Guidelines Bill signed by Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam. Do you see that?
Governor Haslam, yes.
I want to read a little bit from the first email in this string, which is an email from Heather Duncan CCing you and Bill Nichols. Do you see that?
I do.
It says, "Hi everyone, great news. As you know, the state of Tennessee has been plagued for many years with some of the most lenient laws in the country when it comes to the operation of pain clinics. Because of this, we have been flooded with offices operating under the disguise of pain management clinics, while in actuality they are nothing more than pill mills." Did I read that correctly?
Looks to be the case.
And then she summarizes a little bit of the bill, but you reply, "Great stuff. Thanks for the news, Heather." Did I read that correctly?
That's what the email says.
Was Heather Duncan was the specialty sales specialist for the Knoxville East Territory, right?
That sounds correct.
If you were wondering, you'll see if you flip to the next page.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's her email signature. She says that she's the specialty sales specialist, Knoxville East Territory.
Right.
Right. She was sending this to you in July of 2011, and she uses that term that we were discussing earlier about pill mills, right?
That's what she says, yes.
And in fact, she says that Tennessee is flooded with pill mills, right?
That's her opinion in this email, yes.
So as early as 2011, you were aware that your staff in Tennessee was using this term pill mills to describe some of the pain management clinics operating in Tennessee, right?
I really don't recall that. Again, this is over 8 years ago, and if I recall correctly, based on my CV, I was probably on board 1 month with the company.
And I understand that, but all I'm saying is that you don't have any reason to believe that this isn't an email that you sent and received, right?
No. What I'm saying is I don't recall this because it was over 8 years ago, and I was on board with Covidian all of 1 month and probably had not even been through any training yet myself.
Sure. And so, but your sales staff under your supervision was describing pain clinics in Tennessee as pill mills as early as 2011 based on this email, right?
I think supervision would be loose, being that I've been on board 4 weeks. Again, this is Heather's opinion in an email.
Do you recall why you said great stuff in response?
I think that this district that I was hired to take over had several personnel issues, is the way I would put it. And Heather, as I recall, wasn't with the organization much beyond this time frame.
Do you see that she sent this email to Cheryl Herbold?
Mm-hmm.
I need a verbal response, sir.
Yes.
Again, I'm not trying to be rude. It's just the blessed court reporter
Yep.
over here struggles with the uh-huhs and the uh-uhs. And then she also sent it to Richard Keene. Do you see that?
I do.
Were those two other sales representatives operating in Tennessee at that time?
Cheryl, I believe, yes. Richard, I don't know that I ever met. I believe he was gone by the time, or in the midst of leaving the organization as well.
But you don't recall his assigned territory?
You know, I don't. I don't recall.
You mentioned how there was some turnover in regard to the sales reps operating in Tennessee. Was the turnover problem related to the pill mill problem?
Objection.
I have no idea at this point in time. I believe the majority of those folks that left those geographies self-selected out on their own.
Do you recall anybody telling you why that they were self-selecting out?
I don't. That was close to 9 years ago.
On 7?
Yes.
Take as much time reviewing this document, sir. I'm only going to ask a small question about it, but
Okay.
Do you see that this is email correspondence? I think just 3 days after the email that we just went over between you, Bill Nichols, and Heather Duncan.
Yeah, it looks like I passed it on to Bill, the regional director.
And you state that you thought Heather Duncan did a very nice job here capturing the majority of the town hall meeting from Atlanta. Do you see that?
Yeah, it looks to be her notes and opinion on the meeting.
And then, do you recall going to that meeting?
I don't.
And then it appears, I think, in your testimony is that she's summarizing this town hall meeting that occurred on July 25th, 2011, right?
Yes.
And this was one day after the email that we were just reviewing related to the changes in Tennessee law, right?
It looks to be the case, yeah.
So I want to direct your attention to Miss Duncan's notes from this July 25th, 2011 meeting. You see that there are bullet points. Let's go to bullet point number 9. You with me?
I am.
I'm going to read it. Due to the recent changes in Florida laws and clinics shutting down soon, how will Covidian adjust our goals now that the pill mills are shutting down? Did I read that correctly?
That's what's listed here, yes.
That appears to be some question. And then Heather's notes appear to be the answer from Ron. Do you see that?
I do.
And she summarizes the answer as the following. Now that we are having quarterly goals instead of yearly goals, your goals will automatically be adjusted as the changes in the marketplace happen. Did I read that correctly?
According to this document, yep.
So the
Yes.
marketplace that's being described here includes the market related to those pill mills in Florida, right?
Objection form foundation.
I have no idea. I was on board again maybe a month, and I never covered the state of Florida.
But once again, we see here Heather Duncan, specialist sales specialist, Knoxville East Territory, in July of 2011, using this term pill mill in relation to operations. This time it appears in Florida, right?
I can't speak for Heather. I mean, her notes show that, but she took these notes. I did not.
And then when you saw these notes, you thought that they did a very nice job of capturing the majority of the town hall meeting from Atlanta, right?
Yes, but there's a good portion of it that talks about PennSed, and it talks about IMS data that you brought up earlier. Very little about Exalgo. Looks like she was just taking general notes from a town hall.
And are these town halls where sales representatives from across the country get together to talk about what they're seeing in the market for the two drugs that they were marketing?
Objection.
I didn't schedule this town hall. I don't know what the premise of why they held it.
But you would agree with me that that this would be a meeting of sales representatives, right?
It looks to be the case, yes.
And were these town halls done on a routine basis, if you recall?
In my, year and 9 months there, this is probably the only one I recall ever attending, and it was a month on the job.
But part of the purpose of the town hall would be for the sales representatives to ask questions about what they're seeing in the field, it appears, right?
Objection.
That's speculation. I didn't set this meeting up, so I have no idea what the premise of it was, being a month on the job.
And it certainly appears, based on Heather's notes, that at this town hall meeting there was this discussion about pill mills in Florida, right?
She wrote down a question as such. But again, she'd never covered Florida either, in my understanding of her experience with Covidian.
And so, do you recall at all this incident of all these Florida clinics being shut down by the DEA?
I never covered Florida, so I do not.
Were you aware that there were clinics that were being shut down because of active diversion of opioids?
Objection.
I personally am not.
And then, how would the closing of these clinics in Florida require adjusting the sales goals of Covidian?
Objection. Lack of foundation.
I never set sales goals, nor did I cover the state of Florida, so I can't answer that.
Well, apparently the response at this meeting in Atlanta was that sales goals would have to be adjusted because of these clinics being shut down, right? That seemed to be a concern of the sales representatives at this meeting.
Objection.
I think you're making an assumption. Again, I never set sales goals, so I don't know what she's inferring to, or even the response.
Well, apparently there was the question, how will Covidian adjust our goals now that the pill mills are shutting down? That's the question on this document from Heather Duncan, which you yourself at the time described as a very good or very nice job of capturing the majority of the town hall.
Yeah, but you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're asking for me to give an opinion on something that's going on in Florida or goals that I do not set based on somebody taking general notes from a town hall meeting.
Well, I'm asking you, based on your experience as a district manager. As a district manager, you would have some input in setting the sales goals for your team, right?
I have no idea, being a month on the job, if I would or would not at that point in time.
But at some point, that was your responsibility, right?
Setting goals?
Yeah.
No.
Who would be setting the goals for the sales team?
That would come down from targeting and senior leadership. It was basically provided to us.
But you would be aware that your sales team would be given sales targets or sales numbers that they were trying to achieve either on a quarterly or a yearly basis, right?
I was aware that they were given targets.
And sales goals.
The sales goals would be a byproduct of those targets and the potential for them to utilize appropriate therapy. But I didn't set those goals either.
So is it your testimony that you don't know why Covidian would need to adjust sales goals based on the pill mills shutting down in Florida?
Objection form. Objection foundation.
Can you restate the question?
So is it your testimony that you don't know why Covidian would need to adjust sales goals based on the pill mills shutting down in Florida?
Same objections.
Yeah, I don't. Not only did I not cover Florida, but I never set sales goals. So why they would adjust up or down is outside of the scope of what I was asked to do.
Can we go off the record for just 1 second?
Time on the monitor is 10:32 a.m. You're off the record. The time on the monitor is 10:33 a.m. We are back on the record.
Just one copy here.
I think that there's...
Oh, there's...
They were just stuck together.
No, it's just there's two, unless I'm...
Oh, maybe I'm down a copy. I'm sorry, counsel. You're going to have to go with that, Jessica. I apologize for that. Just been marked document that we'll mark as Exhibit 8. Take as much time with that document, sir, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions about it.
Okay.
So this is email correspondence from January of 2012. Do you see that?
I do.
And it's between you and a variety of people, Bill Nichols included, and also Teresa Crawford. Do you see that?
I do.
And this relates to an announcement from Endo Pharmaceuticals that they were going to have to temporarily shut down production at one of its plants, and that was going to affect the supply of Opana ER, right?
Right.
Do you recall this incident?
Vaguely.
And so, Opana ER is an opioid, right?
I believe so.
And then Bill Nichols, who I think is your boss at the time, right?
Right.
Email or forwards you this story about Endo having to suspend production, and he says to an email to you and others, Endo asking docs to refrain from new patient starts for Opana ER. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and then you respond sending an email out to what appears to be your entire team at the time?
That looks correct.
And that would include team with coverage of East Tennessee, right?
Objection.
It's hard to say. There's different people here than what you referred to earlier. Looks like the majority of South Carolina, Western North Carolina. Teresa specifically was in Chattanooga, so a portion for sure.
Well, you would agree with me that that Chattanooga is in East Tennessee, right? Question about Tennessee geography today.
Yes.
So you respond back to that team, at least some of them operating in Tennessee. Team, huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand who the big Opana ER writers are that are going to be impacted and jump on this opportunity. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, I read that.
You go on. Please examine your top writers and go get this business, right?
Yes.
So I think that you testified earlier that the target lists that were developed had to do with specialties of doctors and not the number of opioid scripts that they were writing, right? Do you recall that testimony?
That their targets included some of those, but they also included their entire geography, is what I was referring to.
Sure. But here, when we're talking about Opana ER production problems,
Mm-hmm.
you're not directing your sales team to go look at specialties. You direct them specifically to go find the big Opana ER writers, right?
But I don't know who those individuals are. If you can see the top of the email, actually Teresa Crawford states that to me. So vaguely, they need to understand their marketplace, and they would then potentially go talk to those folks that use Opana ER based on the data provided by the company.
Sure, but you didn't go tell them to go out and just find any Opana ER writer. You specifically used the term big Opana ER writers. And
But I
when you
don't-
say that, you're talking about the people who are writing a lot of Opana ER scripts, right?
Objection form.
Based on their examination of their geography. So as you can see, she provides those providers which she would have had to go and look at or understand within her marketplace.
Yeah, I get that, but what
Yeah.
you were telling her to go do was go find the big Opana ER writers, which are the people who are writing a lot of Opana ER scripts in her territory, right?
What I was telling all of the district, which is South Carolina, Georgia, Western North Carolina, and a portion of Tennessee, was to say, examine who are going to be impacted, emphasize who is going to be impacted by the shortage of Opana ER. So it was everybody included equally.
But you don't just say, go find any Opana ER writer. The term you use is big. Big means they're writing a lot of scripts, right?
Objection form.
It's the number of scripts that is the person that you're directing your sales staff to
I
go
don't think
find.
big defers to that. It could be somebody that is an Opana writer based on however they examine their geography. They know their territory better than I. I never called on these physicians.
So you want this jury to believe that your term, big Opana ER writer, did not mean the people who were writing the most Opana ER scripts in the territory.
Objection form.
Is that what you're asking the jury to believe today?
I'm not speculating on what I'm asking them to believe. I'm telling you what I believed it to be.
Okay. And then Teresa Crawford gets back to you and says, top five. Top five, not any old five. The top five. And she lists them out, right?
She does,
And these include writers in Cleveland, Tennessee, right?
right? That she lists.
And you sent this email directing your sales team to target the big Opana ER writers after the email where you were informed that Tennessee was plagued by bad laws and flooded with pill mills, right?
Objection to form.
That's incorrect. The earlier email you referenced is an opinion of a representative.
Well, I understand that. I'm not saying that you held that belief. But my question is, you sent this email directing your staff to target the big Opana ER writers after you had received the email that Tennessee was plagued by bad laws and flooded with pill mills, right?
Your premise is incorrect. Opana ER, if prescribed by the prescribing information, is a correct therapy for pain, as is Exalgo ER. Both the ER standing for extended release. It has nothing to do with the premise in which you're trying to set.
So you're saying that this email isn't after the email that we looked at back at Exhibit 6?
If you're asking me chronologically by date, yes. But the premise that you're saying it's referring to a pill mill, it does not.
So, and then you direct the sales team when they're talking to these big Opana ER writers to emphasize the positives of Exalgo with the Tom and Eva case studies and the availability of Exalgo today. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Do you recall the Tom and Eva case studies?
I don't. That would have been approved information that would have gone to the FDA for approval, though, if it's a case study. It would have been founded based on a corresponding PI that all case studies are provided with that would be within the prescribing information.
But you were, at least at the time, aware that these case studies existed, right?
I don't recall. I mean, again, this is every bit of, 7, 8 years ago.
But you were directing your sales staff to use that Tom and Eva case study in targeting those big Opana ER writers, right?
I think it's within reason to say that those would have been appropriate for the use of Exalgo.
Okay.
right, so we've been passed a note that Elizabeth Hutton needs to be joined to the deposition, and she's given us a telephone number.
Let's get off the record.
Time on the monitor is 10:44 a.m. We are off the record.
Poor Miss Hutton, she's always...
Time on the monitor is 10:45 a.m. We are back on the record.
Did you give him the document? Sorry.
I do not. I need to tell you this. The weekend are we on break?
I'm sorry. We had a small document kerfuffle, Miss Hutton. We're continuing. We're on the record.
Thank you.
And for Miss Hutton's information, since she's not in the room, I just handed the witness Exhibit 9, which carries the Bates label MNK_TNSTA 0893794.
Wow, that's bad.
Take as much time with this document as you need, sir. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about it.
I'll state for the record that I'm going to try and move the phone, see if that doesn't alleviate the static.
We're having technical difficulties with the phone. Let's go off the record.
Time on the monitor is 10:47 a.m. We are off the record.